AuroraWaves.com. The news comes to you with the compliments of KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, finger licking good. And with your newscast at this time, I'm Ron Robinson. A very good evening to you. First, the lead stories. Guyana appears to have calculated its oil earnings for this year at $74 per barrel. A man believed to be behind the social media character Mudwater has been arrested. Regionally, Antigua and Barbuda has put a brake on plans to allow unvaccinated persons to enter that twin island nation. St. Lucia is moving to ease the backlog of cases in the court system and build spacious courts to allow social distancing. And internationally, the Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has refused to attend the federal police headquarters as ordered by the Supreme Court. Those are the lead stories. The details of these and other stories in a moment. After a hard day's work, delicious comfort food is all we crave for. There at KFC, they've got you covered with a wide choice of delicious, finger-licking good meals from any of their 9 locations, including the Amazonia Mall at Providence. And there are 6 drive-through locations for your convenience. Their 11 herbs and spices are sure to blow those post-work vibes away every time. It's the perfect way to end a hard day. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
And now the news in detail. As Guyana expects the price of oil to be about $74 per barrel this year, the price held at $90 a barrel after Brent crude reached more than $90 a barrel, its 7-year high. Finance Minister Dr. Ashni Singh said in his national budget presentation that the average price of crude oil is expected to increase this year, growing by 5%, owing to continued high demand to an average of $74 per barrel in 2022. Reuters reports that the market has fluctuated between concerns about a tight global supply and expectations that the U.S. Federal Reserve will tighten monetary policy soon. Benchmark Brent fell 15 cents to U.S. $89.81 a barrel in fluctuating trading, with both oil types swinging back and forth between positive and negative territory. Prices were up on Wednesday, with Brent climbing above $90 a barrel for the first time in 7 years, amid tensions between Russia and the West. Threats to the United Arab Emirates from the Houthi movement in Yemen had made the oil market shiver. Russia, the world's second largest oil producer, and the West disagree over Ukraine. That tension has fueled fears that energy supplies to Europe could be disrupted, although concerns are centered more on gas supplies than on crude oil. Guyanese will soon have a $2,000 bill to spend. Governor of the Bank of Guyana, Dr. Gobind Ganga, confirmed that the new note will be in circulation in another few weeks. He says the $2,000 note will depict the One Guyana Unity theme and is part of plans to commemorate Guyana's independence anniversary. The central bank governor says that he had already hinted some months ago that the new bill will be produced. He says the new note will have to be published in the official gazette, and a copy will be formally presented to President Irfan Ali before it goes into full circulation. A New York man has been sentenced to 18 months in prison for his role in an illegal pump-and-dump stock manipulation scheme. U.S. Attorney Charles J. Kovatz made the announcement after senior U.S. District Judge David S. Doty sentenced the defendant. According to court documents, Christopher James Rajkaran, 36, of Queens, New York, and Guyana, participated in a scheme to hijack and assume control over dormant public shell companies. Rajkaran and his co-defendants used their control over the companies to fraudulently manipulate and pump up the price of the company's stock so that they could profit from the sale of stock at inflated prices to unwitting investors. According to court documents, Raj Karan and his co-defendants carried out the scheme by obtaining hundreds of thousands or even millions of shares of stock in dormant public shell companies. They then traded over the counter at low prices, often for less than a fraction of a penny per share. Raj Karan and his co-defendants then assumed control over the shell companies by creating and filing fake resignation letters and board resolutions. In these, they purportedly announced the resignation of the existing management team and the appointment of one or more conspirators as new officers and directors of the companies. Raj Karan and his co-defendants used their control over the hijacked shell companies to issue fraudulent press releases and filings designed to fraudulently pump up the price of the hijacked company's stock. Raj Karan and his co-defendants then dumped their stock by selling at the fraudulently inflated prices to reap the fraudulently obtained profits. A man has been arrested after he admitted ownership of a suitcase containing 5 kilograms of marijuana. The bust was made at a police roadblock at Weldad, West Coast, Berbice. Police say they stopped a minibus at a roadblock and the driver pointed out the owner of the suitcase. Investigators say the passenger admitted ownership of the 2 bulky parcels of leaves, seeds and stems. He was arrested, taken to the Weldad police station, and the marijuana was weighed. There were 12 other passengers in the minibus. 12 persons were last night left homeless after a fire destroyed a 2-flat wooden building on Cross Street, Stabroek, Georgetown. The Guyana Fire Service says the fire possibly began after a lighted candle fell and a flame made contact with combustible materials. Investigators say that the owner, 74-year-old Joan Bowman, and 3 others occupied the top flat, while 8 other persons occupied the lower flat. Mr. Gary Westmus, who lives in a makeshift structure in the same yard, told reporters last night that the fire quickly engulfed the building.
Then into the back downstairs. He always writing paper and all sorts. So it started from him. It engulfed in no time. That's the back rocking. So it just swept through.
3 fire tenders responded to the blaze back of the parking lot of Ashman's building. Police say they have detained several persons in connection with the social media character Mudwater. Guyana Police Force Crime Chief Wendell Blanham says that Kieron Bruce, suspected to be Mudwater, was arrested. Mr. Blanham says several pieces of electronic equipment were seized. He adds that investigators were also able to acquire some voice messages, and when an analyst comparison was done, there was a match with the Mudwater commentary. Police say they received several complaints of cyberbullying implicating persons who are making publications on social media under the name Mudwater. As a result of this series of complaints, the Guyana Police Force says it was obliged, under the provisions of the Cybercrime Act 2018, to investigate the allegations. Police say after the investigation is concluded, legal advice will be sought. And now for regional news. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, says that schools across the world must reopen. Despite the continuing spread of the Omicron variant, UNICEF says governments must do everything in their power to keep the virus from further disrupting children's education. To avert a learning catastrophe and put children back on the learning track, UNICEF recommends mitigation measures to help keep schools open and investments in digital connectivity to ensure no child is left behind. UNICEF says other measures should include catch-up classes, mental health and nutrition support, protection and other key services. The Global Children's Agency says it supports the vaccination of children once vaccines are available to them and once priority groups are fully protected. Consistent with WHO recommendations, UNICEF recommends keeping schools open and ensuring that countries' COVID-19 control strategies facilitate children's participation in education and other aspects of social life, even without vaccinating children and adolescents. St. Lucia is taking steps to reduce the backlog of court cases. Jury trials have not been held since 2020 due to the need for adequate space among jurors and officers of the court. Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre also says that a new court building will be built and will take into account the need for social distancing. More in this report from HTS St. Lucia.
Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre has made it clear that his SLP administration intends to fulfill the long overdue pledge of successive administrations to complete the construction of new halls of justice. The court system has been backlogged for years with lengthy pre-trial detentions, exacerbating overcrowding at the Bordelais Correctional Facility, where remand prisoners outnumber inmates serving time. The situation has been compounded by the pandemic. Director of Public Prosecutions Dasrian Green recently revealed that St. Lucia has not held a jury murder trial since January 2020 owing to COVID-19 public health protocol restrictions due to confined court building spaces.
Presently, there are 327 persons on remand at our correctional facility as opposed to 172 penal. There are over 90 persons awaiting trial for the offense of murder, while we continue to struggle with the difficulty of finding appropriate housing for our courts.
Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre says there are allocations in the forthcoming budget to beef up the judiciary and turn the sword on a new court building.
In the budget, we have a provision for extra judges so that we can deal with the criminal backlog. The criminal backlog has been spoken about for a long time, but nothing had been done. In spite of our fiscal constraints, we are going to have a special court. In fact, we are liaising with the courts so that we can get our, I think there are scores of murder trials, court tonight, yeah? We're going to see if we can get going to relieve the backlog. And also this year, we're going to be turning the sword for the Halls of Justice. Because again, you have issues with court space. Because of COVID, juries have to be in panel at a particular social distance, and so we're going to be building a House of Justice.
Poor air quality at the aging buildings on Labrie and Paynier streets eventually led to their abandonment.
In news just coming to hand, the People's National Congress Reform and the Alliance for Change today held talks on the election of a new opposition leader. Highly placed sources say that the talks were adjourned to next week. The post became vacant after Mr. Joseph Harmon resigned last week. He remains a parliamentarian. Currently, the legal power to recall and replace parliamentarians rests with the APNU plus AFC representative of the list of candidates, David Granger. We now return to regional news. A proposal to allow unvaccinated travellers to enter Antigua and Barbuda with just a negative rapid antigen or PCR test was placed on hold by the government until more data can be gathered. The World Health Organization, WHO, recently said vaccination restrictions inhibit travel and increase travel costs, but don't make travel any less risky. The body has been encouraging countries to move towards removing vaccine mandates, saying they were economically detrimental. More in this report from Antigua Broadcasting Service.
The proposal to allow unvaccinated visitors to enter Antigua and Barbuda with the benefit of a rapid antigen or PCR test has been placed on hold. During the update provided during Thursday's post-cabinet media briefing, government says it needs to gather more data. Information Minister, the Honourable Melford Nicholas, says the government has not seen a fallout in the tourism sector from the original policy, meant to stymie the spread of COVID-19.
We have not yet seen any pronounced impact of the original policy of requiring people to be vaccinated. It has not really dampened the enthusiasm for persons who want to come here for a vacation.
Vaccines have been proven to help lower the risk of contracting and spreading COVID-19, as well as prevent severe infection. However, with tourism being the country's primary revenue generator, Cabinet, he says, is prepared to revisit this position.
What is now a competitive position in Antigua, if we maintain that position for much longer, could also turn out to be uncompetitive if the global community moves there. So this is not a fixed position for once and for all. We are looking at it from the standpoint of, at this particular point in time.
Antigua and Barbuda's Information Minister Melford Nicholas ending that report from the Antigua Broadcasting Service. In Arima, Trinidad, families getting ready to have dinner had to dive for cover when a volley of gunfire erupted outside their homes on Thursday night. Residents of Pinto Road and Bellamy Street also reported hearing sporadic bursts of gunfire from automatic weapons at different times between 7 and 8 p.m. Arima police said no one has reported any deaths or woundings, but several reports of property damage were made. Newsday visited Temple Street on Friday and spoke with residents. Francis Luces said he has lived in the area for over 40 years, but never heard gunfire for as long as he did on Thursday night. Luces, who also runs a shop, pointed to several bullet holes in the iron gate of his shop. And now for international news, we join the BBC World Service.
Hello, I'm Eileen McHugh with the BBC News. The top US military official, General Mark Milley, has said the Russian troop build-up on Ukraine's border is the largest since the Cold War and a conflict would be horrific. General Milley, who's chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said the forces Russia had assembled could cause significant casualties if they were unleashed, especially in urban areas. From Washington, here's Gary O'Donoghue.
The Americans, in a sense, trying to keep up the pressure on Russia, but also trying to remind Vladimir Putin that all his options are open, including a diplomatic route, a way of negotiating a way out of this problem. They don't want to tie his hands. So really all the options still on the table, but a rather chilling phrase from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs when he said this was the biggest build-up there'd been since the Cold War. And if you think about it, that's in more than a 30-year time span.
The United States and the European Union have promised to cooperate to secure Europe's energy supplies as tensions continue over Ukraine. In a joint statement, Joe Biden and the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the two sides were working on the continued sufficient and timely supply of natural gas to the EU. The West African regional body ECOWAS has suspended Burkina Faso's membership following this week's military coup. Here's Anne Soy.
West African leaders have met virtually to discuss the situation in Burkina Faso. Two delegations, chiefs of defense staff and a ministerial-level mission will travel to the country to meet with the coup leaders. This was revealed hours after the man in charge in Ouagadougou, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, spoke publicly for the first time. He asked for international support through what he called a time of crisis. He led a mutiny in multiple military barracks last weekend before detaining President Roch Kabore. The mutineers demanded for more resources in their fight against jihadists.
The Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has refused to appear at the federal police headquarters in Brasilia, as ordered by a Supreme Court judge on Thursday. Mr. Bolsonaro has appealed against the decision. Leonardo Rocha reports.
The judge gave the president 24 hours to answer police questions about an alleged leak of confidential information during a live online broadcast he did last year. Part of the information was also published on Mr. Bolsonaro's Twitter account. During the broadcast, Mr. Bolsonaro discussed undisclosed details of a Supreme Court investigation against him. He is accused of disseminating incorrect data in an attempt to discredit the Brazilian electoral system. The relationship between the President and the Supreme Court has been extremely difficult since he came into power 3 years ago.
World News from the BBC. Argentina has reached a deal to refinance a $44 billion loan agreed with the International Monetary Fund 4 years ago. Without the deal, the country would have defaulted on a $700 million repayment, which was due on Friday. Argentina's president described the terms of the deal as reasonable. Data from Oxford University shows that 10 billion coronavirus jabs have now been administered around the world. A tally compiled by the British University shows that more than 60% of the world's population have now received at least one dose of the vaccine, but this figure falls to less than 10% in low-income countries. At the top of the list is the United Arab Emirates, where 99% of the population has been partially or fully vaccinated. In Nigeria, the figure is just 6.5%. Talks in Vienna aimed at salvaging a 2015 nuclear deal between Iran and world powers are said to be reaching the final stage. In a statement, negotiators representing the so-called E3, France, Britain and Germany, declared that January had been the most intensive period of talks so far. The US, which pulled out of the nuclear deal in 2018, is not taking a direct part in the talks, which resume next week. A week after his death, the rock star Meat Loaf's most popular album, Bat Out of Hell, has re-entered the UK charts at number 3, its highest ever placing. Released in 1977, the operatic rock song originally failed to charge at all, only starting to sell the following year when Meat Loaf appeared on a BBC television show. Meat Loaf, who was born Marvin Lee Aday, died last Friday, aged 74. His death has triggered a new surge in affection for his songs. BBC News.
That brings us to the end of this newscast, which came to you with the compliments of KFC. Finger licking good. Is it a special occasion? Are you on a budget but still want a filling and also mouth-watering meal? Look no further. KFC is here for you at 9 locations and 6 drive-thrus, including the Amazonia Mall at Providence, which now delivers from Shore Base to Little Diamond. Call 632-0533, 6080-162 or 503-3591. KFC.
It's finger licking good.
Now, to end the news, a look at the lead stories once again. Guyana appears to have calculated its oil earnings for this year at $74 per barrel. A man believed to be behind the social media character Mudwater has been arrested. The People's National Congress Reform and the Alliance for Change held talks today on the election of a new opposition leader, but no agreement was reached. The two sides will meet again next week. Regionally, Antigua and Barbuda has put a brake on plans to allow unvaccinated persons to enter the Twin Island nation. St. Lucia is moving to ease the backlog of cases in the court system and build spacious courts to allow social distancing. And internationally, the Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has refused to attend the federal police headquarters as ordered by the Supreme Court. And that's the end of the news. This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.